Hello EDU 618, this is my first screen of Mastic tutorial. I'll be discussing the best way to calculate the next year's Safe Harbor target goal for reaching AYP. So if a school doesn't reach AYP outright by having an 81 or 79% proficiency in math or reading, then they can also reach AYP by reaching a Safe Harbor goal. So there are two ways to calculate it in theory. One, you can do 10% more than the previous year's proficiency rate, and the other is you can do 10% below the previous year's non-proficiency rate. And the question we had in class was, which one of these ways of calculating is easier, or which sets an easier target for the school to reach? So for the first one, it's pretty simple. You just simply take P1 down here and you multiply that by 1.1. So P1 is the previous year's proficiency rate, and then 1.1 would be increasing it by 10%. And that gives you P2, the next year's proficiency target goal. Equation 2 is a little more complicated. These equations need to be a function of the same variable. So in order to get the previous year's non-proficiency rate, you take 100 minus P1, which is the previous year's proficiency rate, and then you multiply that by 0.9, which gives you 10% less than the last year's non-proficiency rate. Finally, you take that term here and you subtract it from 100, and that gives you the new P2, which is the new proficiency rate target. So equation 2 simplifies into 10 plus 0.9 P1 just through simple algebraic manipulation. And we are going to graph this function using a program from repneronline.de. There's a lot of different online programs like this, but they do provide an easy way to graph functions, and you can actually save this graph onto your computer and use it in a PowerPoint if you needed to. So for the first graph, we're going to do 1.1x, which x equals P1, or the previous year's proficiency rate. For the second one, we're going to do 10 plus 0.9x. For both of these, we're going to press enter to have it graph. So I'll go up here first. My mouse wants to work. It's not working. Okay, here we go. And we'll do the same thing down here. Now, as you can see, they're exactly the same, so you can't see any differences. That's not exactly true because you need to change the scales here. So we don't care about 2, 3, or 4 in the graph, so we're going to get rid of those by changing the range on the x-axis from 0 to 100, because 100 is the highest proficiency you can have, and over here we do 0 to 100. Oh, try that again. 100. Then over here we have our two graphs. So blue is the first method, 10% more than proficiency, and red is the second method, 10% less than non-proficiency. So as you can see, if you're above 50% proficiency, the second mode of calculation, the red line, would give you an easier target for your school, and the blue line will give you a harder target for the school. If you're below 50%, then the red line would actually make it harder for you to reach proficiency, and the blue line would make it easier for you to reach proficiency. So it really depends on where you're at with your present day proficiency rate. If you're above 50%, you would rather have 10% lower than your non-proficiency, but if you're higher than 10%, you would rather have 10% higher than your proficiency. And once you have this graph, you can right click it and just say save picture as, and then you can use it for whatever presentation you want to use it in, or for whatever purpose. So thank you for listening, and that's it.